Record. All right, so I'm here with Rosie. Now, it was Rosie in school. Is it Rosemary? Is it Rose? What do you want to be called?
You know, my family still calls me Rosie, but when I lived in Spain my senior year of college, and the Europeans don't do nicknames. So, and also Rosemary it's not popular, but Mari Rose is, which is like
Okay.
with my name reversed. So I just switched to Rosemary at that point, and then I got hired, to work as a flight attendant, and your full name just comes up. So I just made the switch at that point. But I still have people from, high school and grade school in my family. They still call me Rosie. So you could call me Rosie,
There
Bill.
you go. There you go. There you go. So yeah, I have people, and it kind of like catches me off guard sometimes because I was 23 years old when I opened my business, and nobody called me Billy. Like that's just not a thing, right? Like my family would call me Billy if I went to a Christmas party, but not, at work or anywhere I go. Guys all call me Geigner, and then what you call it. But when I run across girls I went to high school with, they still call me Billy. Like that I was real familiar with. You know what I mean? Like if they were around my family, then they call me Billy, and it's kind of funny because I'm just so, I don't know. I don't feel old, but I've always been in charge. So Billy has this sort of like, I don't know, like jokey kind of like, I don't know, like a kid name. And yeah, it's just weird when someone does. So I just want to make sure that, it wasn't, because Rosie's who I think you are. So
You can call me that.
good, good, good. So I want to hear Spain senior year of college. That sounds pretty darn interesting. How'd you end up doing that?
Well, I went to University of Iowa, and after the first year, I just ended up staying there during the summers because I lived in an apartment, and I had my own life, um, and just taking like one or two classes during the summer. And so, because I did that, I was already done with all of my courses that I needed for my major, which was English. And so my senior year, I just needed more credits. I didn't need necessarily any specific credits, although I had already taken some Spanish classes. So by going and spending my senior year in Spain, I was able to get a Spanish minor. Of course, I haven't spoken it much since I got back. So,
Oh, huh? Boy,
so
that person I thought would be
yeah, no,
pretty
my
killer.
Spanish was really good then. But I've been studying French to work the French route out of San Francisco because I
Okay,
work as a flight attendant for my day job.
sure.
And the Spanish trips that we have just were not good trips. It was like all-nighter to Mexico City. And I love Mexico City, but you just didn't get that much credit of time for how many days you were gone.
Okay.
Versus because the Paris flight is longer, you were able to get, like double the pay in the same amount of days as say working in Mexico City.
There you go. There you go. So that seems like a pretty interesting flight as far as like, Paris. That's got to be something that people, I think most people would like to see Paris at some point in their life, and then you see it all the time.
Yeah, well, I was going every week
Well,
before
oh, yeah.
the pandemic. And
Okay, so and I want to talk about that too, because like
yeah.
your job, like, so how has it been affected by the whole COVID situation? And you know what? I said I was sorry, give you my condolences online, but I'm so sorry about your dad. That's
Thank
so.
you.
I don't know what to say. My dad's alive, and I don't speak to him. So like, it's I can totally grasp the situation for you that like you liked your dad. Like it was you were and I think I wrote that to you too because I remember you liking your dad.
You're
Uh,
like, oh, she really likes her dad.
yes, right, right, right. I remember being in my truck and driving with you in there, and you're just talking and talking and talking. I'm like, boy, this girl likes her dad. This is something.
Oh. Yeah, I was like his mini me. We
Yeah.
were, out of everyone in our family, because there were four kids in our family, my dad and I were the most alike in terms of family members that were alike.
Now, if I
So
remember correctly, your dad was an FBI agent?
yeah, he was. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, he passed due to COVID. Did he have like, I mean, if you don't mind me asking, did he have other comorbidities? Was there something going on with them that was, you know,
No, you
that,
know, he was in great shape. However, he had had cancer 10 years previously that he had recovered from, and it never came back.
okay.
He did chemo, radiation, and surgery, and it went away, and it never came back. And he changed his eating habits and his all of his habits to be so healthy, even though he was always somebody that worked out. Um, they told him that he had colon cancer. With colon cancer, they said you had a 75% chance of it coming back if you didn't exercise regularly. So he exercised 5 days a week minimum. He
Wow.
drank water that was, you know, um, cleaned by reverse osmosis. I mean, he was a very careful with his health.
Yeah.
Um, and so what happened was before they were saying that it was when they were saying that it was only a few cases in Seattle and New York, he got it in the suburbs of Chicago at the gym.
Oh,
He
wow.
went to the gym, for his regimen, and he came home and he told my mom that somebody on the machine next to him, when he was halfway through his workout, got on and was coughing up a storm. And she asked him if he changed machines or stopped working out. And he said, no, I just wanted to finish because I had like 15 minutes to go.
Yeah.
But, a couple days after that, he had a cough, and it's, you've probably heard some of these stories, but his was one of those cases where he had a cough for a couple weeks and then it went away. Didn't seem like anything, and then it came back, and so he went to the doctor. They tested him for pneumonia and sent him home. They didn't even know that COVID
Right.
was in the area.
Right. Right. Right.
So he ended up being the first COVID patient at the hospital he was admitted to.
Wow. Well, over the summer, a friend of mine's father, who's probably similar in age to like your parents and my parents and stuff, he got it, and I think he had survived cancer like 4 times. And like I talked to the guy who's, his dad was in the hospital, and we were, he was like, he goes, I don't want to sound bad, but I don't think he's going to make it. He's on oxygen. He's never been on oxygen, even with cancer all the times and everything else. And he recovered. So like you almost can't make any rhyme or reason out of any of this as far as it goes. And people think you can. And it's like extremely gross when someone's online and they're saying, it only affects people who aren't healthy or old, or I've never been like really accused of being a nice guy. Like that's not my thing, right? So, but it's almost astounding to me to see these people write stuff, and it's like, I don't know if it's for you, it's got to be 100 times worse, but to see these people write stuff and think what they think because they want to, or it's convenient for their political position or whatever it is, it's just amazing how callous they can be when someone lost someone or something like that. I have a friend who's a yoga instructor. She's got to be in her 40s, and her son was 18, ran marathons, totally healthy, no comorbidities. He died from COVID.
You just don't know.
No, you don't. And
There's a lot that they don't know about this disease.
right.
And I think that eventually they're going to figure out that there are other, not pre-existing biological factors, but whether it's blood type or whether,
Some genetic
there's
situation.
something where some people are predisposed to not recover regardless of how old they are, or,
Right.
I mean, yeah, that Broadway actor that died, that was very young. I don't think that he had any pre-existing conditions as far as I know. And he was also, a young, healthy man. And,
Sure. Well,
they,
they're saying that 7% of the people who have passed had no comorbidities. They're relatively young. And I mean, people are terrible at doing math, I guess, because when you figure 300,000 people and just 7% of that, that's 21,000 people that really had virtually nothing wrong with them, got a cold and died. So,
The
it's
other thing is, even if somebody does have a pre-existing condition, and this is something that I find frustrating and hurtful actually, is they just because they had diabetes or just because they survived cancer, they were not about to die.
right, right, right. The metaphor that I've always put forth is if you had cancer, even if it was terminal cancer, and you got on a plane to go to Arizona to visit your family and it crashed, you didn't die of cancer, you died of the plane crash. So I don't understand. The logic doesn't make any sense to me. If I had terminal cancer and I only had 5 months to live, those would be the most important 5 months. I wouldn't want to lose 5 days of that. So, like the things they say, it's unbelievable that they say them, and then it's unbelievable even more that they shout it into social media, where somebody that is affected by it could see it and be like, they just don't care. Their political worship of some meatball is just so much more important than being decent to people who lost somebody.
Yeah.
It blows me away. And right now we're in a position where we're going to double this number in a short period of time. And I don't know. I don't wish it upon anybody, but some of these people, it's like, unless something terrible happens to you, you just don't seem to care unless it's exactly to you. Like, I just don't get it. I mean, before all this went down, like, I've paid a little bit of attention to the things you post and stuff like that. You seem to be an empathetic person and stuff like that before this situation. It bothers me when I see somebody who's pretty much a selfish piece of shit, and then when something happens to them, then they're all about being empathetic. And it's like, oh, I can't deal with those people. Like, like, either care about people or don't. But anyway, so.
Well, I would just say, one thing that I've experienced is, people, make ignorant. I don't go on social media that much. Like, I don't go on Twitter anymore because it was too political for me. I couldn't keep my mouth shut and thought, this doesn't help anyone.
Right.
So I'm only on Facebook and LinkedIn, which is professional, and then, Instagram, which is just pictures. So I don't see a lot of the negativity, but I will say just in person, insensitive people as well as sensitive people make comments as nobody acts as if somebody amongst them may have had a family member die of COVID. Everybody thinks it's far removed. And so, I've had people say in front of me, oh, well, the only people that die from that are, they already had something wrong with them, kind of thing. Or I've also had somebody, people say to me stuff like, oh, can you imagine those poor people that are losing, their family members, and they're being sympathetic, but it's like, I'm in a work situation or I'm in a professional situation or I'm just talking to someone that I don't know that well. And I don't feel like going there personally. And I just have to sit there and sort of like, feel like I'm a denier. You know what I mean? Like, because I just don't feel like engaging in that conversation right now. And it did recently I worked with two people who kept bringing it up. And finally I was like, I understand my dad died of COVID. And their response was, no.
Right. Wow.
Like, I'm gonna lie.
You're making me relive it for the last half an hour now because you will not be quiet about it, right? It's got to be. I mean, everything is. I think the thing that drives me the most nuts about people that are empathetic or that are on the left is the the overwoke people, right? The people who are constantly trying not to, like, you're a Midwestern girl. I would assume that you're a fairly tough person to begin with anyway. So you could handle, like, someone fucking up and saying something stupid. But you're not gonna like fall down and like lose your mind or anything like that. But like people who are constantly I see it with the wheelchair stuff. Like I'm on a couple of different groups on Facebook that it's more traveling stuff because when I'm paralyzed from my chest down, and honestly, the air flight stuff, I hate it. They put me on that dolly. The whole thing's terrible. So I avoid it like the plague. But I do, I do like to go places. So if I do, I try and find places that I can go that are going to be accessible. So I go on these sites, and every once in a while, someone will post something about some nonsense about, like, please stop using the word handicap. And I get on there and I'm like, just shut the fuck up. This is not something that anybody that's in my situation is worried about. We've got all the same worries that you have, and then just a couple extra ones as to where can I go and how can I get there without, like, I want to go have a good time. I don't want to have, a problem, but worrying about like what somebody calls something, it's just oversensitive, woke nonsense. But then on the other hand, you got to be aware a little bit of some stuff too. Like, I'll have situations where people get pissed off at me because I'm really independent. I live alone. I go everywhere I go. My sons have had thousands of wrestling matches. I've never missed any of them, even if there was a blizzard. And, if someone goes to open a door for me or something like that, I'm like, I got it, they'll be mad at me. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I know your heart's in the right place, but like, I wouldn't have left the house if I couldn't open a door. Like, we'll be all right. So, it's a real wacky world, and it's just getting wackier. I would rather deal with the overwoke people, though, than the people who are, I don't know. It's like, it seems like it's their life goal to be a dick, and then they finally got their president elected. So like, he's a dick, and like, the whole thing's it's just a fun thing for them. It's been fun though, this whole, not to get all political, but Trump losing has been a blast. I thought it was only going to be fun for maybe like a week or 10 days. He has been losing for like a month now.
I know, because he loses like every day.
Right. I follow him on Twitter, and it is glorious. I just tweet back at him, please never let this go. This has been like the gift that keeps giving. It's just on and on and on. Every single time he loses, like one of the 60 court cases he loses, he just all caps, I will win, or we will. I'm like, oh my gosh, you guy. It's so shallow and small. It's crazy. But your job, not to like, I don't want to stand the COVID stuff like with your dad, but your job had to be affected. At one point, the air travel was shut down, right? There was none. No international, at least, right?
They shut down most of the international. In fact, we still don't have most of our international routes. They laid off 15,000 flight attendants just at my company.
Oh, wow.
So I made the cut, but I became much more junior again.
Sure.
And so, it's kind of a hard time, but I'm just grateful that I have a job,
right.
And it just seems like somebody else always has it worse. I mean,
that's a fact.
I lost my Paris route, and I'm flying these terrible domestic, like long days that I never thought I'd have to work again. Right. But you know what? At least I have a job. And, we closed our international bases, and I worked with this flight attendant she used to be based in Japan. And now she has the legal right to work in the United States. I don't know what her background is, how she has that status, but she does. So now she has to commute to San Francisco and work these bad domestic trips with me.
Right.
And she's never worked domestic United, United States trips before. So you have these girls from Asia that have only worked international, and half of their passengers have been from their home country, now flying to like, Vegas to Denver. And they're like, what's going on?
Like the people of Walmart are on your plane, right? It's a completely different clientele.
And it's different planes for them.
I know. I would imagine that the people going back and forth to Paris are probably more interesting people to begin with, let alone, the, wife beater, flip-flop wearing people that are going to Las Vegas. I mean, that's quite the difference.
Yeah. Well, there's interesting people going everywhere.
Yeah, but interesting is an interesting word, right? Like, I mean, interesting. Yeah, there's some interesting people out there. I don't want to hang out with them.
Yeah.
Okay, but how about the job itself? Besides the fact that, oh my God, the whole thing's turned upside down and you're not going to Paris, you're in a metal tube with all these people now. And then you've got I know a couple people that flew, and people in the beginning were having every excuse in the world not to wear a mask. I got asthma. I got this. I got that. Like, they were just making up bullshit so that they didn't have to wear a mask. I'm claustrophobic was my favorite one. Like, this somehow is a thing. Does someone get by on a loophole that they don't have to wear a mask on a plane?
No. So I missed that phase. So what I did was, because I saw that our flight schedule was reduced by about 80%, I bid reserve, knowing that they would never call me to assign me a trip.
Okay.
Because we were so understaffed. So
Right.
that worked for about 3 months. So the first 3 months of COVID, where they were struggling with getting people to, wear masks, and also the airline was trying to figure out what exactly do we need to make our rule be, to get compliance. They worked that out, because originally they had said, if children under 2 don't have to wear it, or if you have some kind of a condition that prevents you from wearing it. So
Right.
Of course, that's where people came up with, well, then they realized, okay, that's not going to work, so they changed it to, if you're under 2 years old, you don't have to wear it. Everybody else, this is at my company, everybody else, you wear it, it goes over your nose and mouth. If you won't wear it, we're banning you from our airline. And any tickets that you have are canceled.
Yeah, forfeit, not
Yeah.
right.
I think they might get, I don't know, they might get a refund. I'm not sure, but we have to write a report, and then they don't get to fly on our airline anymore. And so, we ask them twice, that most people comply. I think the hardest thing is people with glasses. They need to practice.
Yes, they fog up or whatever.
Because it fogs up on them and they can't read, or they can't watch a movie. And, I wear goggles at work to protect my eyes.
Yeah, sure.
I have found, to prevent them from fogging, what you do is you pull the mask all the way up and rest the goggles actually over the mask.
Okay.
And that way it doesn't fog up. But most people who wear glasses haven't figured that out, and they're struggling, and they keep trying to pull it under their nose, and it's not allowed to be like that.
Yes, right.
So.
Yeah, no, I mean, right. People drive me nuts as far as that stuff goes. I mean, we deal with it with construction, for a little while it was geographic. So if the closer you were to Chicago, the more compliant places were, the more strict they were with it. But as soon as you got out, south of I-80, all bets were off. Like, you would go into places and literally think that nothing was going on, and it was crazy. Actually, my son went into a bait shop and had a mask on, and a guy turned around and gave him grief about it. Was like, take that stupid mask off, kid. This is America, or something like that. And I'm like, thank God I wasn't in there and walking around. I would have ripped his arms off. I would have killed the guy. I mean, if this is America, don't I get to do what the fuck I want to do, and you can do whatever the fuck you want to do? What are you telling me anything for? It just drove me nuts that they were this, I don't know, vocal about their views and like imposing it on someone else just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that mask wearing was politicized.
Right. Right. It's yeah.
So,
I mean, I always said the worst thing that Al Gore ever did for the environment was to go on those tours by himself. He should have taken a Republican with him, and then we wouldn't be politicizing the climate change and everything else. But well, the reason that I wanted to talk to you was I see the screenwriting stuff, and now did you go to school to write or no? Okay, so explain what you do first, because maybe I got it wrong too. I don't want to be, you write screenplays or plays or what do you write?
so well, I went to University of Iowa, which is a really big writing school, and I started off pre-med, but I got sucked into the creative writing department there because it was so good, and there were so many wonderful authors coming in all the time to give readings, and it's an exciting place for a writer to be.
It's an exciting place for a wrestler to be too.
Oh,
Yeah.
wrestling, but
Well, my sons and stuff. So yeah, we're constantly, we watch a lot of Iowa wrestling and stuff like that. But
oh, okay.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I I went and got my master's in fine arts and creative writing at San Francisco State University, and I worked as a flight attendant, while I was going to school, and I was really studying poetry, playwriting, and fiction. And when I graduated, I had a book of poems published that won an award. It's called Sky Girl. It's about a flight attendant before and after 9/11, and that's published by Fence Books. And I produced a one-act play at the Phoenix Theater in San Francisco about witches. And then
Oh, wait. Wait. Okay, witches. How did you get? Yeah, where did you? Okay, so first off, I knew that you were a flight attendant, so I'm like, I know jack squat about flight attendants. I turned the TV on a couple days ago, and there is a series on HBO or HBO Max or whatever called The Flight Attendant. And I'm like, I'll just check out one episode of this. Oh, that was a mistake. It's a complete, I don't know if you know what it is, but it's like, no, it's not. And it was nothing that was ever going to get me to relate to what you're doing. It was like, this woman is a alcoholic, drug user, slut, and a flight attendant. And she wakes up with some guy that she picked up on the plane, and he's dead. And then I'm like, oh, I'm out of here. This is not going to help me relate to Rosie in any way.
yeah, I never watched that show. Honestly, I don't want to watch stuff about the airlines for fun. It just stresses me out. I've seen enough people trying to put their suitcases in a bin when I'm actually at work. I don't need to watch it for fun at home.
There you go.
But
how do you go from you wrote poems about the flight attendant situation to the witch situation? What do you practice witchcraft?
no.
I had a witch on my podcast, so I just didn't know.
Oh, yeah, no. It's called The Letter Witches. They were just sort of literary magical girls.
Okay.
Sisters. Yeah. But then I started just, I had taken a few screenwriting classes, and I just got more and more into the screenwriting. And so I've been focusing really on that for the last several years, and doing well, like winning awards. And this year I placed in the Nickel Fellowship as well as the Page Awards for their quarterfinalists, which is those are the two biggest screenplay competitions. The Nickel Fellowship is the one that's hosted, sponsored by the Academy Awards. So, I'm making progress, and then I'm actually co-producing a short film that I wrote with Dave Usner. I don't know if you saw The Last Black Man in San Francisco, but he's the naked white guy in it. If you ever see it.
Oh, I didn't. I'll have to check it out. That's wild.
Yeah, and so we're co-producing a film that I wrote. It's about a family of deaf clowns that they live in a forest and they have a little girl, and they come into the city to perform and raise money, and they have a tragic moment. And it's sort of, you could look at this as being a superhero story, when you see the flashback of how Batman became Batman, or
Sure.
this is kind of like episode 1 of children of deaf adults are actually called CODA, CODA, child of deaf adults.
Okay.
And they actually have some interesting challenges that not everybody thinks about. They're kind of like children of immigrants, because sometimes they have to communicate for their parents with, the store tender, or,
Yeah.
so they have some additional responsibilities that maybe most kids with parents who can hear that don't have.
Right.
So,
Now, do you remember the Legrands that we grew up with? Like April Legrand and Jimmy Legrand and
I'm so horrible. I've lived too many places and I've met too many people.
Well, their parents were both deaf.
Okay.
So they had like the light things in the house that flashed if the doorbell went off, and like all that kind of stuff. And they did have, just like you're saying, extra responsibilities over regular kids. Regular kids, your parents take care of themselves. Now, what you're saying resonates with me, because like my sons and my daughter and stuff, they were like doing the lawnmower at 8, 9 years old. They were doing things that other kids wouldn't do, because I'm doing the wheelchair. I'm not going to mow the yard. You're going to mow the yard. So they had other responsibilities over top of what a normal kid would have. And I think it translated to them being a little bit more responsible as they grew up for things that they could do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think things like that cause a child to have some more responsibilities can just add to just their strength of character, and that combined with their parents' love, they can really blossom into this amazing thing. So that's where I compare it to a superhero. That's sort of the journey that this girl in the movie goes on. But so we're really excited because we were able to actually cast deaf actors, and they're actually a couple, which is great because it's the time of COVID.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, good, one less thing to worry about.
Sure.
And then the girl that we cast, her mom is deaf, and then we actually cast her mom to play the older version of her. It's just a short scene, so there's no lines in it. The character doesn't have to be deaf. Obviously, the little girl isn't, but it doesn't matter whether she can hear or not, actually, in that scene. But so we were excited to be able to support the deaf community. And one thing that turned out to be really neat that I hadn't thought of, I wrote these characters because when I was in training center for flight attendant, we had a foreign language requirement, and one of my classmates, both of her parents were deaf, and her first language was American Sign Language, which was what informed these characters. But one of the things that's been really a blessing to see is that they're so excited about this project. And I realized that, they're used to being sort of cast as like maybe the deaf friend, but not having the story revolve around them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where they're the central character, and this is about their journey. So it's been nice. We had to push the production back. We were supposed to film it last week, and it was just the COVID was rates were spiking so much that we decided to push it back into March, just because, we don't want to risk anybody or their families coming to the set. So even though we're going to follow protocols and get the COVID test, still nothing you do is 100%, because it doesn't necessarily show up for a few days or.
Yeah, well, that's, even with the podcast stuff, I started doing the podcast because when I got injured, I realized that like one of my favorite things was to make some food, open a bottle of wine, and have conversations that are, more meaningful than like, the weather or what are you watching on TV or like, the small talk bullshit. Like actually, and sometimes for some people it takes maybe 2, 3 glasses of wine for you to get there. But when people start to really have conversations about things, I generally think the general public's pretty stupid. But everybody seems to know something about something that they know something about. So like, I really like to hear about those things, and then I can, broaden my horizons and like, figure out what they're talking about. Like I have a whole mess of questions as far as how you're developing characters. And I ended up with was not the biggest reader in the world, especially of fiction before the injury. But with time on my hands, I have a favorite author now, which is a real weird thing for me to say. But and his books, John Irving, have been made into all kinds of movies. The Cider House Rules, and A Prayer for Owen Meany was made into something that was titled differently. But there's like 4 World According to Garp. So, and with reading those books, I think that sometimes the job that you're doing is villainized because you're the person ruining the book when it goes to the movie. A Prayer for Owen Meany was ruined. It was absolutely destroyed. I don't even know, like it didn't even make any sense. Like I watched the movie and I was like, oh my God, who did this? The person in the book is someone who's like exceptionally small, but they're not like this. Like the person in the movie was like Willow, like the smallest dwarf in the world. It was not a feasible situation for that character. Like the character was an outstanding wrestler and a really really mean dude, and the person that played in the movie, he couldn't wrestle a koala bear. Like it was just terrible. So like how do you're talking about developing characters and writing for characters? Are most of the things that you're doing a screenplay for something that come from some other literary work that you're taking and then you change into a movie or a play?
No, my screenplays are pretty much all based off of a true incident as its kernel. So something that really happened. And then I kind of, I study it that, when it happened or unless it was firsthand. And then I sort of, the characters just sort of evolve from, studying the situation. And for example, I just wrote my latest screenplay is about my dad. I actually was planning on writing it before he got COVID. I thought that my dad was such a great character because, my husband would always say, "Oh my God, you have to write something about your dad," because, he just had a hard time expressing his emotions. And, he's a classic dad from when we were kids. Like men are more woke now or whatever. And he's this Irish American guy who, liked to drink too much and had a temper but was really loyal and really loving and very good. And anyways, so I always wanted to write something about him. So I asked him what his most interesting case was, and he said the Diane Masters murder. And so he organized all of his notes, and there have been several books written about it, and we talked about it a little bit. And we didn't have time to do our full sit-down interview with it because he got COVID all of a sudden, and by the time we knew he had COVID, he was in the hospital. So so I read the books to sort of fill in some of the gaps of the storyline, and actually have an appointment to talk to Ivan Harris, who's was another FBI agent who worked on the case also. And so, it's based off of our family, and I exaggerate things. It's kind of like taking silly putty You
Yeah.
know how you take silly putty and you get a picture of whatever was in the newspaper, whatever, but then you kind of pull it and reshape it and stuff. And so that's kind of what I do with my stories.
So was it, when you read these books, was it wild to read a book? What, like, is your dad mentioned in the books that have to do with the?
You know, what's funny is he is, but sparingly. And he complained to me, you know, I remember him complaining when these books first came out a long time ago. He was like, these authors that write these books, none of them bothered to interview the FBI agents who worked on the case. And
Yeah, that seems like a really good idea, because these guys literally studied what's going on. Like, you could get a great summary from these people. They'd be super smart.
I think what happened is that case actually went on for so long, and there were police detectives assigned to work on the case who worked on it for years, very hard, and didn't ultimately solve the case. It ultimately moved to the FBI. Turned out that there were police officers involved,
Oh, wow.
which was why the FBI had to get involved. But the authors that I read, it seemed that they had just focused their interviews with the police detectives on their portion of the story. So, and I don't know, maybe the book was just going to be too long to, you got to kind of narrow things
Sure, it's
down.
got to be edited of some sort. Sure, I get it.
Yeah.
It's just, that's pretty cool to, have something that, like, that's my dad. Like, that, in this story, that's cool. And then what you're going to do, which would, you'd be able to extrapolate, your father probably better than most people do. And then you could definitely add to that character, because you can fill in the things that wouldn't be there. So when you write this, will you write it like more, like, what person is it in? Are you writing it from your dad's viewpoint, or are you writing it from a third person, or?
Yeah, screenplays are all written in third person,
Okay.
because they're kind of like directions for a director to read. They're sort of like a recipe, then you add this much, so it's like, then Roger walks to the door.
Okay.
It's not like a novel where you can decide which person you want to write it in.
Sure. Okay. So then, obviously, when you write a screenplay, is this one set up where it's already someone's looking for this, or is it something that you'll shop around afterwards to see if someone will make it into a movie?
No, I'm going to shop it around.
Is that, yeah, is that a fun part of this, or no? Is it the worst part of this?
Well, I'm making progress. I've already met with some different people. I've gotten some reviews on it, really good.
Good.
But, a lot of times I'm in that phase right now where people are like, I think you should change this one thing, and then they're like, oh, maybe if you change this one thing. There's been a lot of fine tuning going on lately.
Really, that seems like I don't know.
It's never ending, but that's why film scripts get written. There's often like 40 drafts. And I know when you go to production, that continues to happen. Like, the director will want to see some changes. The actor comes on board and he wants to see these changes. It's just, and then of course, when it gets edited, they can change things in editing.
Sure.
So, you don't really know what movie you're making till you see it, I guess.
Right. There are actors that are totally cut out of movies that they acted a whole part in and it's gone.
Yeah.
So why? Okay. So why? It seems like the talent, or even the school background you have, you could write a novel instead. And then, I guess there's an editor in that situation too, but it seems like you'd have more control over your craft than you would. Because, yeah, boy, oh my gosh, there's a million chiefs in the process that you're talking about. And then, like, my question would be, like the casting person and stuff like that all would drive me absolutely up the wall too, because you have a vision in your head of who these characters are, and then they're like, well, we'll get Harrison Ford, and that's not who you had in mind at all. So like why not write a novel instead? I mean, is it more lucrative or easier to get work in the screenplay industry than it is to write a book and get it published?
Um, I wouldn't say that. I think it just depends on who you are and what appeals to you more. I mean, I'm a visual writer. I mean, even my poems had a lot of images, visual images in them. And so because screenwriting, the focus is the visual medium, screen,
Yeah,
whereas if you think of a theater, a play, you're mostly listening, it's mostly dialogue, right? The focus is dialogue.
right.
Um, and then in a novel, of course, you can put all of that in. Um, I'm actually writing a children's chapter book right now that I then intend to write as a screenplay. But I realize that my chapter book is very visual. It's almost like a screenplay just written out in prose form.
There you go.
Um, but so I think it's sort of like saying to somebody, why do you play the drums and not the guitar? You know, it's just
That's a
like,
question. That's probably a stupid question that I would definitely ask. It would be like, I
you
mean,
like, isn't it easier just to play the drums instead of learn all those keys on the, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, right, right,
just,
right, right, right.
there's
I mean,
just,
being on the outside of it, it is. I often do wonder why someone would play bass. Like, you don't get any girls.
I actually have wondered that myself.
Well, my friend Tom McCoy is learning how to play the bass right now, and he's doing like the so in the Midwest here, and I don't know if they have them everywhere, but they have like School of Rock. So like they go there, they learn how to play songs, and then they put them together in a band. I don't know if you saw the Jack Black movie School of Rock, but
Yeah.
they do the same thing with adults, and they throw them out there, and they're like, all right, now you're a band, play these songs, and they play a gig and everything else. It's super neat and everything else, but that's definitely a question that like the next time I see Tom, I don't want to ask him, like online or anything, but like or in a text. But I'm like, why the bass? Why would you? That would be the one thing. Like, I mean, I don't know. I think most people that pick up a guitar or an instrument in a rock band situation, it's to get girls, and the bass player never gets girls. Like, that's not a thing. He's married, so I'm sure it doesn't matter. But okay, so
My husband's a guitar player, but he doesn't play bass. Should I ask him what he thinks
yeah,
of
well, ask him. I'm pretty sure the running thing is that bass players don't get the girls.
We were just wondering, why do you think somebody would go into playing the bass, like compared to playing the guitar, lead guitar or drums or? Come here for a second.
Yeah.
This is my friend Bill. This is Marvin.
Hi, Bill.
How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. So I got a buddy of mine who picked up the bass guitar, and he started to learn it a couple years ago. And I haven't seen him like out for a drink, COVID, the situation. But my question is going to be, dude, why the bass guitar? They don't even get girls. Like, what's the deal?
Well, is he married?
He is married, so he doesn't need to do.
He doesn't need to go get girls.
I'm not, so that's where my, my life
Probably
revolves
because
around.
that's all his wife would allow him to play.
Right, that was a smart move on the wife's part for sure.
Well, I think it's like positions on a baseball team. Like everybody has a different talent or feel or draw. When I play gigs and a little kid comes in, like a 4 or 5-year-old, you can see they'll walk towards, they know at 4 or 5 which guys they like and which instrument they want to play. So they'll just stare at the drummer or the organ player or the sax player. They just know.
Oh, I love music, and I could figure that like if you're somebody who's got like a really good rhythm, like if you're good at dancing and all that stuff, the bass guitar, like Flea, is incredible. The funk that he brings and everything else, he couldn't play anything else. I mean, he's a spectacular bass player, but it does seem to be the more marquee spot would be, like you're saying, shortstop or lead guitar would be
Right.
the spot to be. So
Yeah. But bass also, it holds the whole thing together.
right,
It's
yeah, the drummer's taking his
roots.
cues
So
off.
if you
Yeah,
like being supportive as opposed to stellar, it's
yeah,
a wonderful support role. Plus,
yeah.
when you get older, it sounds better.
Yeah, I had a 12-inch mohawk. I didn't want to support anybody. I just wanted to stand out all on my own. Yeah.
I showed him a picture of you with your mohawk.
Are
Right.
you still a guitar player?
No, I was never a guitar player. I was a skater kid, like just goofball. I was an athlete more than
Yeah, Rosemary said you were a wrestler.
Yeah, well, that stuff too. But I mean, more football in high school than that. But I started my sons out in kindergarten wrestling, and they're supposed to be wrestling the NCAA this year, but COVID, we took a gap year,
Yeah.
so just working construction. But yeah, no, I mean, the music stuff is. I'm very into music. I've always got music on, so I get the whole like where do you want to be, and I mean certain personalities. If you're a drummer, I think you've got your own that animal from the Muppets is probably the key personality as far as a drummer goes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Now, I mean, if you want to get real cynical, when we were kids, the person played the bass who was the worst guitar player. Because
I
there's
did take 2 years of guitar lessons, and it was I don't think that they ever got even to it was all acoustic stuff. I don't believe we ever got to a point where they split us up into who wasn't very good at it and who was better at it, sort of a thing. We were just learning chords, and, silly little songs and stuff like that. But well, same thing with baseball. Like you were making that analogy. If you're a terrific baseball player, you're going to play shortstop or second base. If you're not very good, you're going to play right field, sort of a deal. They're going to put you out in the outfield. But cool.
Well, good to meet you.
Nice meeting you too.
Yeah, have fun.
Good luck. I've seen the pictures and stuff. Seems like a swell guy. What you call it? But anyway, so as far as the screenwriting stuff, I think you made a good analogy as far as like why would someone do that? It sort of does seem like you would run in more interesting circles if you're writing screenplays, right? Because you are dealing with all this other process that goes on, where someone who's writing a novel, I don't know, might be kind of a lonely existence, right? Where you're sort of like in an apartment in a room by yourself with, all quiet, trying to think up characters and, all that other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I do think networking is more important in, TV and film, because, you have to meet people to collaborate with, whereas you really don't when you're a novelist.
You think about TV. Would you ever want to do something like that? Would seem like a lot of work. Like to write for a regular, like a show that's on, like 13 episodes a year, whatever they do.
You know what, Bill? When you see how much they get paid per episode, you're like, yeah, I guess I could do it.
Yeah, right. No, I would bet you.
I mean,
when I see a movie star go to doing even a limited series on HBO or something like that, like a Game of Thrones or something, there's so much more work that needs to be done on something like that versus an hour and a half movie. I mean,
yeah.
Keanu Reeves is in John Wick and he does 2 hours worth of actual on-screen time. I'm sure there's more work behind the scenes, but someone who's on 8 years of a sitcom, I don't watch TV shows. I just don't find them to be funny. The laugh track bothers me and all that other stuff. But the amount of work has got to be enormous for a writer. So, but is that a hard gig to get into?
It is. You have to be in LA if you want to be part of a writers group. You have to be in LA because they meet. Now because of COVID they don't, but normally they meet in a writer's room and actually sort of work out the scripts together. So it's writing in collaboration more than writing a feature. So I've been writing features. You know, I think I could write a limited series, although I haven't yet. It's on my to-do list. Because a limited series, and similar to a feature film, it has an end in sight.
Mhm.
You know, my stories I tend to have an idea of how this is going to end. It's a journey that finishes, whereas, you know, some of these things, you know, they just keep them going as long as they can. I know that they usually plan ahead of time how many seasons that they expect it to have, and they have a Bible and they have an arc they plan for it to take, but of course it could change over time. And you know, I don't tend to write things that are that long, you know, that are going to go on for years.
Sure, sure.
So.
So like I have an appreciation for like, you know, what you're doing, and I think that like I've had talks with my sons about music and stuff, and it's like you know, the difference between, you can have someone that's like great at playing the guitar, a really good singer and stuff like that, but like the difference between someone who writes their own material and then performs original material versus just someone who, you know, covers bands and stuff like that, it is, you know, for me it's a world of difference. That originality makes a big difference. um you know, so like it seems like the further along we get, the harder it is. Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you're doing parallel thinking, or you write something and you're like, oh my God, that's way too much like this that's already out there? Do you remember, like, you couldn't write a character that was like wearing a leather jacket and was like, hey, you know, they can't do Fonzie over again. But like,
Well, I
you know,
guess you could if enough time had passed.
yeah, well, not that one, uh, but so do you ever find yourself in a situation like that? Like, Tom Petty had a song, and like 8 years later, the Red Hot Chili Peppers wrote a song, and he actually sued them because if you listen to the two songs, they were the same song. And I don't know if the Chili Peppers knew it was the same song. Like, you know, they had probably heard the song and then just wrote their song, and it ended up sounding very, very much alike. So do you ever try and make sure that you're not, there's so much out there, like you can't possibly have seen everything. So how do you avoid, you know, copyright or something like that?
Oh, I copyright my writing as I go. You know, usually every few drafts I'll get a new copyright. Either I'll use the U.S. You know, government copyright, but I also will do sometimes just an earlier draft with the Writers Guild, because it still gives you some protections and it's a little cheaper than doing the copyright. Um, but no, it's funny because this has always happened to me. I haven't seen everything, right? And
Yeah.
so a lot of times when people will read my script, they'll say to me, oh, because when you tell people, executives, managers, producers, whatever, about your script, they want you to tell them what it's similar to, so that they get the vibe of what you're trying to tell them.
Really? That's
Yeah, they
interesting.
want you to say, like, this is like whatever. Um, and so a lot of times what happens to me is when I'm getting feedback on my script, people will tell me, this is like this film. Like, okay, so
Right.
the film that I wrote about my dad, for example, somebody read it and said, this is like the movie History of Violence, which I had never seen.
Okay.
Um, and so I went and watched it, and it is, you know, in the same vein. You know, they're always
That's the
different,
Viggo
but
Mortensen one, right? The
yeah, yeah. So it gives people, I mean, it doesn't get as violent as that one does at the end, but it gives people an idea of, oh, okay, violence in the suburbs in a family life kind of thing. So you know, I don't worry about it if it's similar to something or not. I mean, I just feel like everything has its own journey,
yeah.
and actually, you know, um, there were two Wyatt Earp movies that came out within
Yeah.
months of each other. And so to me, that's a perfect example of, don't look around and worry about what anyone else is doing. Just do your thing. And if it's supposed to find its way out there, it will,
I always felt bad for Kevin Costner with that, because that Tombstone movie was just so much better than the Wyatt Earp movie was. And Val Kilmer did, like, the Tombstone movie is one of my favorite movies. Val Kilmer did such an incredible job with that Doc Holliday character that nothing was going to compare to that. But you know what? The way you're saying it, I think I had the total wrong take on it. It seemed like, like with music, if you come up with something that's totally original sound, that makes you stand out, and that's good. In your industry, it's like, and I've heard these like pitches before, where it's like the guy's like, it's like Dexter meets Batman meets, you know what I mean? Like, where
Right.
they're trying to give like the examples like you're giving, where it's like they're trying to do things similar. In the industry you're in, it has to be like, well, if you're saying these bunch of things, that all these things make money, then maybe we should invest in what you're doing, because the objective is to make money, obviously. I mean, your objective is, it has to be to somewhat make money, but to be creative and all that other stuff. But when somebody is from a studio or someone that's, in the position to buy it, obviously that's their only position, is to make money. They're not creative at all, which has got to be nerve-wracking for you, because like you got to deal with those people.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, producers are in it to make money, but at the same time, they also want to make the best film that they can. So, yeah, I guess it's just part of the game. I forget who it was. It was some writer, and I forget, it was a woman. My husband and I were listening to her being interviewed, and she was like, every job comes with a shit sandwich. And it's just a matter of what shit sandwich you're willing to eat. And it's like,
Yeah.
and so is it, that's why maybe some writers also become directors and producers, so they can maintain more control of their art. Whereas most writers don't do that. Most writers, after you sell it, you don't get to control what they do to it anymore. They can, change a lot of things, and, you don't get any say. But I don't know. I just trust that people will try to make the best choices that they can for a project, and everybody wants to see it be the best that it can be. And
Now, is that the reason that you moved from the Midwest out to, like you said, you were in San Francisco for grad school or something like that? Did you head out that way because you said you have to live out there to get this?
Well, really, there's not a lot in San Francisco. I mean, I would have to move to LA, really. It would help me a lot if I do. And so we think about moving to LA, but we haven't yet. So when I came back from living in Spain, I knew I wanted to go to creative writing school. And so I applied to a handful of schools, some in New York, some in, or it's just San Francisco State, where I ended up going. And I applied to Art Institute of Chicago. And I got in, I think everywhere except for maybe one place. But while I was waiting to hear back from the schools, I transferred to San Francisco. And just because I put in my transfer to San Francisco, New York, and the San Francisco one went through right away. You're put on a waiting list, and when there's spots available, it goes through. So when I transferred to San Francisco, and then it just turned out that, of course, this was a while ago. I don't know what it's like now. It's probably still more affordable. But when I was going to school, the California schools were still such that they were so cheap. So I went to San Francisco State for very little money, and I also taught creative writing there, which pretty much paid for it. So I just decided to go there because I was already living here, even though I was considering some of these other places. It just worked out. And, you know, San Francisco, the trips that we had at the time were so great for a student. I mean, I used to work, we had the shuttle that just went up and down the West Coast. So I wouldn't leave my time zone, and I would work like 3 days a week, the 5 a.m. check-in, and get to my hotel. I used to bid the double Vegas layovers. So I'd get to my hotel the first day at about 10 a.m. And then I'd go to the pool, do my homework, and then, you know, go to dinner, whatever, come back, get up, do the next, you know, fly a couple flights, end up back at the hotel at noon the next day, go to the pool, work on homework, and then go to dinner and go out. So, and then when I came home, I had the next 4 days off, right? And it was great. So I could go to school, or I did all my homework.
That's really strange. That seems like a job that really, from the outside, it does not seem like something that would fit going to school at all, but it totally fits it because
and I had health benefits and flight benefits. I was like, this is the best job for a student. I got my whole master's degree and I taught undergraduate while I was working. Of course, we don't have those, that shuttle trip anymore, which was really nice because it was just nice not to have jet lag, you know, even though I was getting up early to work the 5 a.m. so I could get to the pool early to do homework and stuff like that.
Now, did someone tell you, so was flight attendant the job that you had wanted, or was it just like, this is the perfect job if you're going to school like this because of all those reasons?
Yes, somebody told me. I would have never known. So when I lived in Spain for my senior year of high school, I realized that the reason people study abroad their junior year is so that they can get themselves set up for when they graduate their senior year. You know, they're making connections, they're going on interviews. So I came home from Spain with nothing set up for myself. I knew I wanted to apply to creative writing schools. So I just thought I would just take a year and apply to schools. Well, my aunt said to me, why don't you apply to be a flight attendant? My friend did that, and she put herself through nursing school. And then she was able to be a nurse a few days a week and a flight attendant a few days a week for her whole career. And it worked out really well for her. So I was like, oh, that's great. And at the time, I didn't know anything about any airlines who would be better to work for, or, you know, I didn't know anything. I just went through the yellow pages.
Nice.
And called all the airlines and asked if they were hiring flight attendants. There was only one. They were hiring flight attendants, and they were like, yes, we're hiring, but you must speak a foreign language. And I had just lived in Spain for a year.
Yeah, right. You're like, perfect, right?
Perfect.
So I mean, like, that's a job that maybe the flights to Paris and stuff like that are less this way, but in my experience, and you know, some of my flying was done to go to Tahoe to go snowboarding and, like, you know, stuff that was fun with friends. You know, we would get on a plane and go somewhere with a bunch of dudes. And, you know, when you're going anywhere with guys like Danny Shanahan and stuff like that, you know, there are problems for the flight attendants for sure. Like, they're looking for the good looking flight attendant. So what sort of, like, I mean, there's got to be some pain in the ass situations. And then I hear, like, on planes, if someone really gets out of hand, they bring the plane down and, like, you know, get them off the plane. It just seems like that's a job that, you know, you set yourself up for some harassment of some sort. Like, you know, I never thought about these sort of things till I got older, but, like, every waitress is in a short skirt, every flight attendant's in a skirt. Like, it's like, you know.
Not really.
Oh, no, not anymore. No. Okay. But I mean, it seems like a job that if you're a nurse, it's sexualized, you know what I mean? Sort of a thing. Like, I guarantee you I could find the sexy flight attendant outfit for Halloween.
Right. Well, you know, to be honest with you, the media loves to talk about the airlines for some reason. And sure, you could pick any, you could pick restaurants and you could do a story on somebody getting harassed, at a restaurant. But, the truth is, on the airplane, I find that most people behave because they are in a group situation so that nobody can say anything to you that the people around them can't hear.
Right.
And so if they want to sort of maybe even flirt with you, they usually they have to come to the back of the plane or something and try to talk to you. And usually you can spot them a mile away and leave.
Yeah, there you go.
Here comes that guy at 11B. I'm going to go up front. Call
Yep.
me if you need me. You know what I mean? It doesn't really, unless you're single and you're wanting to meet people, you don't have to put yourself in a situation where somebody's flirting with you or.
That's good. Because I mean, that's a situation that I think a lot of guys they don't seem to put themselves, they can never put themselves in somebody else's shoes. And to make somebody uncomfortable and then be trapped with them on a plane, at least if you're in a restaurant, you're out of there in half an hour, that guy's going to be out of your hair. But if you're on a 2-hour flight, this sucks. Here, this guy, I just shot him down in the first 15 minutes and I got to keep looking at him for the next hour and 45. It's not fun.
Yeah, people don't really, they don't really ask out the flight attendants that much. Or if they do, maybe slip them a card at the end discreetly. Or I'll never forget this. This was so funny. Oh my God. I worked with this young man who was so sweet and so earnest. And he was from the Caribbean somewhere. And he had this really cute accent. And he was very thin and his uniform was just pressed beautifully. And he was working in first class and he was new. And he comes back to me and he says, Rosemary, the man at 3D slipped me a card that says, do you know any gay bars in DC? Okay. And then he goes, and I looked at the card and I said to him, sir, I do not know any gay bars in DC, but I will be happy to ask my colleagues. He said that out loud. And the man went slit, and I looked at the man. This man you would have never guessed in a million years would be,
sure.
He was probably 67 years old and he was wearing a sweater. You would never think that he would be slipping.
This guy just outed him on a plane. That is awesome.
I said, you know what? I said, I don't think he really, so this is why he told me. He's like, so do you know any homosexual bars to tell this man? He's trying to do.
Wait a minute. Now the guy that you described to me was not a homosexual?
It's not, no, but
your description sounds very homosexual.
Right? So I said, I don't think he really needs a bar. I think he knows how to find them. I'm like, he's hitting on you. That's why he asked you. And he goes, do you mean he thinks I'm homosexual? And I was like, yes, he does. And he goes, but why would he think that? And I was like, I don't know.
Look at you.
You're skinny and you're really neat. Your uniform looks so nice on you.
So I always thought that I dressed well when we were younger, right? And I was probably 22. I was in an elevator in Chicago, nice hotel, and a gay guy hit on me. And I looked at him and I go, I'm not gay. He goes, yeah, honey, I know. And I'm like, oh, really? And he goes, hey, you're not. He was like, you're not neat enough. to be a gay guy. And I'm like, oh my God. I go, I was dressed up for this. Like, are you kidding me? But yes, I mean, the guy you described sounded homosexual for sure. You know, like,
Yeah, well, because it's just a stereotype. Of course, there's straight men that are very neat, you know.
I
But
don't know.
I think it was the combination of the profession, you know,
Mhm.
because there are a lot of gay men that are flight attendants.
Okay, so I have that story on a flight because I'm a dude in the wheelchair. They brought me in there first, and the flight attendant, which was a male guy, sat down next to me and was like, just talking to me. He's like, so, you know, we're waiting for the rest of the boarding to go on and everything else. And for some reason, it was taking forever. And I said to him, you know, so you like this line of work? He goes, well, there's a lot of gay guys in this line of work. And I'm like, really? And he's like, yeah, it's kind of a gay guy thing. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, there you go. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it was, as far as he was concerned, he thought it was true.
Well, you know, what's funny is out of San Francisco, because we have a high gay population anyways, a lot
Yeah.
of the male flight attendants in San Francisco are gay, and also some women. But it's funny because if you fly out of, say, Denver, you know, Denver, the male population, what happened there was when the airlines first started hiring male stewards, as they were called, I think at the time, um, in Denver, there were so many ski bums. But I mean, what appeals to this? You know, the kind of people that like this job, a lot of times are people that want to do something else on the side. You know,
Okay.
they're an artist, or you know what, or they're a ski bum.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
they don't want a real career. They don't want to go sit in an office, but they need health benefits. And you know, so in the 70s, I mean, I worked with some of these straight guys were like, you should have seen when I got hired in the 70s and I was, you know, the only male in the cabin with all these flight attendants, and it was the summer of love. And they're like, you know, AIDS wasn't around. I mean, they were like, this was the best job.
I'm
But
sure. Right. That didn't work out real well being the guy there. It's like being the guy who goes on for cheerleading.
yeah, so you know, a lot of the guys in Denver are kind of these, you know, ski bum kind of jockey guys. So it just depends where you are.
Yeah.
But
Geographic. Right.
yeah, and also of course, you know, there's a lot of people that speak a foreign language that this is a good fit for them. So maybe they, you know, grew up in China, or they grew up in, you know, Paris or something. And so when they're looking in the United States, what job can I get? This is a good fit for them. So, you know, there's that as well. So it's just
Yeah, I
kind
don't
of
know what my perception of it is. Now, is it you? I mean, it's got healthcare, you know, benefits and stuff like that. It pays well enough for like a single person, but it seems like a lifestyle that's not conducive to like married life or life with kids and stuff like that because you're all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how your family operates. I mean, um, you know, a lot of flight attendants make well over six figures. So, you know, they could be, especially if they, you know, I thinking of my one friend, he has a wife and two children, and they live out in Sacramento, where, you know, the housing's a little bit cheaper than it is in San Francisco. And she just has a little job that she does from home. But so she's home with their boys. And, you know, people make it work. You know, I think for people that are in relationships where both of the people are in the airline industry,
Yeah.
that can be hard if they want to have kids.
Yeah.
But you know, I work with a lot of flight attendants that love going on their trips because it's their me time.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
when they're home, they're mommy, and they're making lunches, and they're cleaning, and they're going to doctor's appointments and soccer practice and whatever. And then they get to go, you know, to New Orleans and have dinner with some other adults and go for a nice walk. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
it's their,
completely different persona they can put on when they get there. So how was the culture? I traveled a little bit when we were younger and stuff like that. And like me and Danny Shanahan, speaking of New Orleans, spent 21 days in New Orleans. We drove down there and 21 days of debauchery. It was, right up to Mardi Gras. And then we left and we went up the whole we were gone for 35 days on this like road trip we lost so many brain cells. I don't know what to do about it. But when you're going from, Rosie in the Midwest to San Francisco, good golly, that's like another planet.
Well, it's so funny. So my family, we lived in Bloomingdale, Illinois. And then we moved to a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. And then we lived in Pacific Grove, California, which is like by Monterey.
Okay.
And then we moved to Frankfurt. Well, first we moved to Flossmoor, Illinois. And then we moved to Frankfurt, Illinois. So I moved to Frankfurt in 5th grade. And so I went to, junior high and high school in Frankfurt. But then I lived in Iowa City, which when I was in Iowa City, it had the highest gay per capita in the country. Really? And it also had like a huge art school and a huge writing school and a big dance and theater community. So, it had a lot going on for a small city. And then I lived in Spain, for a year with all different kinds of people, and people from all over the world were my roommates and things. And then I got hired by, the airline where, because we had to have a foreign language, everybody in my training class, most people were not American. Most people were, Swedish, and they got married and now they're living here and, something like that. So when I moved to San Francisco, I don't know. I planned on living with my 2 gay friends, and it didn't work out because the housing market was so expensive and we couldn't find anything. And so I ended up renting a room from some other flight attendants that had only room for 1 person. I don't know. I just slid right in. I just fit in here.
I didn't realize, I guess I didn't know, because I didn't know you that well, that you had transplanted so much. I didn't know that you were so all over. Now, was your father in the military or something before?
He was in the military, but he had left the military. He was an FBI agent. And we moved so much because every time they offered him, he loved exploring, he loved adventure. And every time they said, we are going to offer transfers to this location, he would volunteer our family. Wow. So we moved like every 2 years just because he was always volunteering for us to move. Because he grew up in Beverly and Chicago, and he wanted to like live in other parts of the country. And he never had, so we just moved all the time.
Yeah, no, I totally get it too. I mean, I grew up in Bridgeview and then moved out to Frankfurt, and then that was it. Like, been in the Midwest my entire life. When me and Danny went to New Orleans, we were there like 2 weeks, and I'm like, hey, we're gonna run out of money. Let's just get jobs. And Dan was not that great on like going to work to begin with, so that didn't work out. But I love New Orleans. I thought that whole area was it was a terrific time. I liked the food and the music and everything else was terrific down there. But so I could have easily just gotten a job and started doing whatever. I was already doing carpentry work, so like I could have done that down there. I had a trade, and then later on, we went to 2 different trips out to like Breckenridge for one of them and out to Vail for another one. And the guy I was with, I was like, dude, let's just find jobs. Because I was totally ready to be out of, the whole Illinois area here is like, it's just so boring to look at. I sell real estate now. And one of the things I always push with people is like, listen, even if the house is not perfect, but there's a view, like think about it. Because almost everybody I know gets tired of the house, but a view seems to never get old. If you're looking at mountains, if you're looking at a lake, that kind of thing just seems to stay for a real long time. So that's cool that you were everywhere like that. You at least had a chance to find out what you like and what you don't like. I'm curious as to why, why not get to LA and do this? I mean, what does your husband do that keeps him in where you're at right now? Or is it just the home prices and stuff like that that kind of keep you around there?
Well, no, I mean, San Francisco and LA are both expensive. Because I want to write features, not necessarily television at this point. To be a feature writer, you could live really anywhere. It's just beneficial for you if you can go spend time there to make connections. But I've just been trying to go down there when I can and make connections. So, I had a film that got into a film fest there, and I went, and I made a new friend, and then I got into another film fest there, and that new friend came to the other one to support me. And, so, I'm just been going, cause it's close, been going down there when I can at this point. I'm based in San Francisco, so I like working normally when we go back to normal, hopefully. I like doing the Paris route because it's only 3 days and it's worth a lot of hours, and then I have 4 days off.
Sure.
We don't have LAX. We do have a base there, but LAX is so saturated with flights already that we don't have very good international. We don't have that many international routes out of LAX. So if I were to be based in LAX, I would be flying these long domestic days like I'm flying right now. So most of my friends that live in LA, that are flight attendants, actually are based in San Francisco. So they fly up to San Francisco and fly their international trip and then fly back down to LA. So it adds that commute on. So it's like, do I want to commute every week and be a flight attendant, or do I want to commute and go down there sometimes to try to network for film?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, the hustle and bustle has got to be, and the networking situation there. There's so much going on. I mean, I always hope, anyone I talk to, obviously, like, I'd love to see. So where would I find something that, like you said, you had some stuff that you went to a film festival and stuff like that? Is there a link you can send me that I could actually like watch the production that was put on? Or like it's you said there's some small scenes and stuff like that. Like, where would I find something you wrote that I could like see?
Well, things that I wrote that you can see. I have a short film produced. It used to be on YouTube. I don't think it's still there, or I think you might need a passcode or something. I think it's on Vimeo or something. But yeah, so the film festivals, they generally, because my scripts aren't produced yet,
Yes.
So they will have some screenings, or sometimes the screenings are in the movie theaters and then the festivals like kind of alongside of it. Just depends how it's run, but there's actually really good ones in Chicago that you could go to, or maybe bring your son to, or, they're usually like 3 or 4 days. You might want to go just for like a day, or, and they have panel discussions. It's very educational. I mean, I think your sons would really enjoy it. I mean, even if they ultimately don't want to go into film, just to go for a day and kind of hear what people are saying might be interesting.
See, now I always thought that, the film stuff, we have such a structured, everything around me is about work, right? So like we're doing construction. My sons, they're gonna go to college to be engineers, and I had a crew of 5 guys that worked for me before I got injured, and I would, almost all my guys I would take my sons over those guys any day, just because the work ethic, and then they do everything the way that I taught them to do it and everything else. So like it works out good. Um, and then I think like a year ago, I started thinking, boy, I really neglected the arts as far as like trying to get my sons to do stuff. It's always been really based on like math and science, and then wrestling takes so much time, and we travel for that and everything else, that I said something to my one son like junior year. I'm like, hey, what about like doing a play or something? And he looked at me like my head was on fire. He was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, why don't you, like, like you're going to go into senior year, like, I don't know, do something different. Like, and he was like, that's the craziest thing in the world. But I almost think like I should buy like a drum kit, or I should do something so that they get the arts, because it's so important. I took some college courses like psychology and stuff, and it was immensely interesting to see how someone's mind works, and then to read like a novel that somebody developed a character, and you see like that person must have taken psychology courses, because they put certain characteristics into a character and stuff like that. So I don't know if you've done that or not, or if that's how you derive something. Like, how do you do something that's not every character you're going to write? You don't have those experiences. So how do you put yourself in those shoes?
I guess you just imagine, and then also, I mean, listening to people, you know, we know, I mean, everybody knows so many crazy people, right?
Yeah.
And even working on the plane, I hear all these stories from coworkers and also from passengers. And so, you can empathize with people's experience, just listening to not only the words they're saying, but the emotions that they're having and relaying a story. And, I do think the arts is about using your imagination. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. But have you ever written anything and gotten any backlash from somebody because they didn't feel like it was? When I see things that are written, I like movies. I do. I like to catch a movie if I'm in the gym or something like that. And authenticity is important to me. Like, I like when something is, and I do a lot of on my phone where I'll like, I'm always a little dismayed when somebody writes a movie and there's a character in there that's not actually like, it's historical, the movie, but there's a character in there that's like a compilation of 3 or 4 people, and it's not an actual person. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to do that sometimes in film.
Yes, right. I know it's a necessity, because you
Yeah,
just can't have all these people coming in and out. So you
right.
write one. There was a movie that just came out, Bombshell, that was about the Fox
Oh, yeah.
News.
Yeah, I saw
And
that.
right, the one Kaylee person is not a real person. She's the Robbie chick. She's a composite of some people, which made the movie work and everything else. But it was so weird to have that character in there when all of the other characters were totally people that they made up to look at. Charlize Theron, like, you almost lose that it's her, because the prosthetics and everything on her face is so
Yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that just happens because films have, a finite amount of time to be told.
Right.
And, you can't introduce 3, 4 different people. If you can just condense it into one person having all those different experiences so that the audience can relate, that's what you're trying to get across. And I think that's the main objective. I guess, that would be one difference with like writing it out as a novel, or not even as nonfiction. You have the time to explain things as long as you want to,
Right.
you know?
So do you find that when you're writing these characters or writing because you say there's always a nugget of some historical thing, but then you do the silly putty thing where you're changing the people up a little bit and stuff like that. What is your process for that? Do you have like a pen and paper or something around you all the time in case something comes to mind that you want to add to somebody, or you want to alter something or put something in a character? Do you get something and write it down right away? Or the creative writing to me is interesting because, again, like it's the original writing thing, right? So like it's the artist that does something totally original. What's the process for you? How do you make interesting characters?
You know, it's always different. I guess it kind of depends on the project. Like the one that I just did, the based off of my family, the characters were sort of, you know, based off of my actual family members. And then, you know, just, oh, I don't know. I guess you just kind of, sometimes characters will sort of just blend different qualities from different people kind of come together in your mind. You know, I mean, I wrote one screenplay that has a roommate character, and that roommate is a compilation of at least two different roommates that I had, both crazy. Put it all into one, you know. And so I don't know, it just part of it's subconscious that brings everything together for you. It's not all plotted.
Got it. That I mean, it's just an interesting, there's not a lot of people who their job or, even their side hustle or whatever it is to sort of be creative. You know what I mean? Like if you're a garbage man, you're just picking up the garbage. If you're doing carpentry, there's a little bit of creative that you can do in there. Like if someone wants you to do something, you can come up with something that's different than what you normally do. But if you're someone who's just building, houses in a subdivision, you're really not doing anything creative at all. So it's just interesting. It almost seems like you'd have to, like your other job where you're being a flight attendant, there's not a lot of creative stuff going on there. Like it seems like you'd have to shift gears to get into, like if someone said to me, all right, Bill, we're going to pay you $1 million, but you got to write a novel. I do not know how long that would take me. And I would have to like shut everything else out to be like, I got to develop characters and I got to make it like somewhat interesting. I guess I could draw from people that I knew, but mentally that would take an enormous amount of work. Do you sleep? I mean, do you wake up in the middle of the night with like thoughts on that stuff?
But yeah, I get ideas.
Yeah, right.
I just had an idea.
Right. So do you grab something right away and write it down before you lose it? Because I come up with a gazillion ideas and then I forget them.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, a lot of times during the day, I can just put it in the notes in my phone.
There you go.
But yeah, sometimes I'll have a little piece of paper by my bed, but usually I remember,
I'm terrible at it. I come up with ideas for, it's going to sound corny and stupid, but I come up with ideas for inventions and like modifications for something that I'm working on or something like that all the time. And I will at 3 a.m. be like, this is the greatest idea. And then go to sleep. And when I wake up, I'm like, it's gone. Like I totally forgot what I was going to do or something like that. So I just would think that, a character, there's so much to somebody. And I find the most entertaining movies that I watch are the ones where there's so much to the character. Like, if a character's doing a certain thing, and then you find out that they were, molested or something like that as a kid, or you find out like the backstory, like you were saying with the Batman thing, means so much to that character.
Right.
So, it seems like to build somebody out of nothing or out of just a little bit of something seems like a monumental amount of work, Rosie, to be honest with you. Like,
You know, I'll leave you with this food metaphor and then I'll go make my dinner.
there you go.
It's kind of like an onion. Bless you. It's
Thanks.
kind of like a character is kind of like an onion where you might think of the core of them like, oh, they're a policeman or whatever.
All right.
And then over time, like you'll wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh my God, but he wanted to be a baseball player. And
Yeah.
then, oh my God, he's divorced. Oh my God. And like you'll just kind of the different layers will just kind of come to you. So you just have to sometimes, I don't think you can really rush it, or at least I can't. You just have to let it sort of marinate.
There you go. There you go. Cool. Well, I appreciate you giving me some of your time. I enjoyed the talk. If something comes up that is big and everything else, by all means, like I want to hear about it. So get a hold of me and let's talk again sometime. Good luck, and hope to hear something big coming out of what Rosie's writing real soon.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's great to see you and to talk to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Rosie.
Have a fun vacation. I hope it works out.
Well, we'll see. They won't let us dirty Americans in Canada right now, so we'll see if they let us in there at all.
Okay.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye. All right. If you like the podcast, I know this was a short one. Please click the subscribe button. Love to get subscribers. Love to hear any input from what you think about the podcast. Constructive, I don't care. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, but I'd like to hear what someone has to say about it. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. The podcast can be found on Google Play, the Apple Store, and Podbean. All right. Thanks so much.